G'day, it's Mark and welcome back to the channel. And in this episode, we look at the Commodore VH. The VH Commodore was built between October 1981 and February 1984. It was the third iteration of the Holden Commodore, following the VB and the VC models. From a styling perspective, it was a relatively mild facelift. The car featured a new horizontal grille design. The headlights were also larger and sharper in their design, which made for a more aggressive and, I think, a wider profile look than the previous generation VC Commodore. At the rear, the car featured a new taillight design on the sedans, and in terms of body styles, the car remained available as a sedan or a wagon. Available engines included the 1.9 litre, 54 kilowatt or 72 horsepower Starfire 4, the 2850 straight 6, which had 73 kilowatts or 98 horsepower, an optional 3.3 litre 6-cylinder engine, which had 83 kilowatts or 111 horsepower, a 4.2 litre V8 with 100 kilowatts or 134 horsepower, an upgraded 4.2 litre with dual exhaust had 115 kilowatts or 154 horsepower, the 5 litre V8, which had 117 kilowatts or 157 horsepower, or the dual exhaust 5 litre V8, which had 126 kilowatts or 169 horsepower. Available transmissions included a 5-speed manual on the 4-cylinder and the small 6, 4-speed manual on the other engines, and a 3-speed automatic. The engines were largely carried over from the previous model, although there were revisions made to the 1.9 litre and the 2850 engines, and these were designed to improve fuel economy. Gains on the 1.9 of around 12.5% and 14% on the 2850 were made over the previous VC model in terms of fuel economy figures. Mechanical specifications were largely the same, although there was the addition of the 5-speed manual transmission, which was an option. And that was on the 1.9 litre, as I said, and the 2850 6-cylinder engine. In terms of overall dimensions, the overall length was 4,706 millimetres or 185.3 inches, 4,730 millimetres or 186.2 inches for the wagon. The wheelbase was 2,668 millimetres or 105 inches. The width was 1,722 millimetres or 67.8 inches. And the height was 1,363 millimetres or 53.7 inches. The model designations also came in for some changes. The SL was now the base model, and the SLX was now introduced as the mid-range, with the SLE remaining the top-of-the-line model. The SLE was available with a number of options, and these included cruise control and a trip computer. The trip computer measured average speed and fuel consumption. The wagons were also available in SL and SLX variants, but not SLE. In September 1982, Holden released the Commodore SS, and this was a model that was a mainstay until the end of Holden production in 2017. The SS stood for Super Sport, and it was offered with the 4.2 litre V8 engine as standard. The SS was available in red. It also featured a 4-speed manual transmission with the availability of 5 litre V8 engines or automatic transmissions. It also featured quite a nice hot wire wheel design, and it really made for quite a nice little package. Keep in mind that during this period, Ford had offered the XE Falcon, but it had concluded production of the V8s in 1982, and Holden really made a lot of the fact that the Commodore was still available with a V8, saying there's nothing quite like a V8. And this was a very good strategy that positioned the Commodore as more of a performance vehicle, more of a youthful image, something that Ford really had really owned and captured for many, many years with the release of the XR V8 back in 66, and the release of the GT Falcons. But with the demise of the V8, Holden really captured this market. In addition to the SS Commodores, there were also 3 up-spec versions that were produced by Peter Brock's HDT Special Vehicles Group, the Holden dealer team. And these HDT cars were named SS Group 1, SS Group 2, and SS Group 3, with the Group 3 being the high-output 5-litre V8 in a higher state of tune than the other models. And these were available exclusively in Marinello Red, but there were also later versions made in Alabaster White. The Group 3 V8 produced 184 kilowatts at 4,750 revs, which is 247 horsepower. In 1983, an executive pack of the base Commodore was introduced, and this was designed to target fleet owners. And these cars featured automatic transmission and air conditioning as part of the Commodore SL package, but there was no distinguishable external identification badges. Other special editions of the Commodore released in Christmas 81, 82 and 83 were badged as the Commodore Vacationer. With the effects of the 79 energy crisis being a distant memory in many customers' minds, buyers started gravitating back towards the larger Ford Falcon, and Ford was really producing a large car that still provided excellent fuel economy with its alloy head 6-cylinder, and they marketed that car very aggressive, as having a bigger car that was as economical, if not more economical, than many smaller cars, including the Commodore. And as a result of this, Ford actually became the top-selling car in Australia. In terms of export markets for the VH Commodore, vehicles were sent to Indonesia, and they were only available with the 1.9-litre 4-cylinder in SLX trim with a 5-speed manual. Because there was no emission controls in that market, the power of those cars was actually higher at 59 kilowatts or 79 horsepower. Also available, and after being absent from the market for quite some time, almost 10 years, in the Malaysian market, Almus Motors Corporation, AMC, brought the Holden brand back in 1983 with the VH Commodore. Cars were also exported to New Zealand, including the Commodore Royale, which was a 4-cylinder upmarket vehicle. This reflected the fact that in New Zealand, unlike Australia where the mainstay car was a family 6-cylinder, in New Zealand the 2-litre market dominated that New Zealand segment or that New Zealand market, and so the Royale was a car that was pitched to that audience. It's also mooted that there were a number of HDT Commodores that were made available for the New Zealand market, and again, because of different emission standards, these cars supposedly had a higher output than their local market vehicles in Australia. The Commodore Royale was actually quite a nice package with cloth seats and more upmarket SLE type rear tail lights, and also the alloy wheels that were taken from the previous VB and VC series Commodores. In terms of the 5-speed manual gearbox, Holden sourced this from Borg Warner, and there's some speculation that it really was just the Mitsubishi Sigma gearbox, although Holden claimed that it was not the same gearbox, but the ratios I think on first, second and third, and I think fourth were the same. So it doesn't suggest it was an all-new gearbox, but I think top gear, fifth gear, is slightly different from what the Sigma's ratio was. But I think basically they did share a very similar gearbox between the Commodore 4-cylinder and 2850 5-speed versus what was available on the Mitsubishi Sigma. In terms of the 2850 engine, that actually had a power decrease from 76 kilowatts down to 73, and torque was reduced from 192 newton meters down to 187. But that was designed so that it was still compatible with that 5-speed gearbox. You also couldn't buy a 3.3 litre manual transmission in New South Wales, because New South Wales had more stringent emission laws, similar to what California, I guess, has versus the other parts of the United States, although not as stringent. But as a result of that, the 3.3 litre engine was not available with a manual in New South Wales. In terms of handling, the only real changes came with lower control arms, stiffer bushings for the lower control arm pivot, and a reduction of toe-in. So there's limited suspension travel, but the Commodores were renowned for their road holding. They were very good handling cars for the time, and that's well recognised. The changes that were made to the suspension were designed to improve directional stability and also reduce steering wheel vibration. The SLE was a very nice package, particularly the shadow tone, the two-tone treatments. That would have to be my favourite, probably favourite Commodore overall, and favourite certainly in the VH series. The VH is also well regarded because they were the last of the chrome bumper cars as well. Part of the features that were on the SLE included the trip computer, and that was developed by VDO. And I should say it was standard on the SLE. I think I mentioned it was optional earlier on, but it was actually standard, but it was optional on other models. In terms of the functions of the trip computer, you just through the press of a button, it had 7 different pieces of information: a clock, distance to empty, readout in kilometres, distance travelled for each trip in kilometres, average speed for each trip, the rate of fuel consumption for each trip, and then the total fuel used for each trip. So it was a bit of a novelty at the time. I mentioned earlier that stylistically there were a number of changes. The VH had a new and lower bonnet with the headlights being 25 millimetres lower and sloping more dramatically into the grille, which also protruded further into the front bumper bar. The front fenders were also new. The turn indicators were larger and more prominent. The bonnet also had a larger grille opening for additional airflow, and the taillights, as I mentioned, were on the sedans were redesigned with wraparound lenses. There were additional lenses inset also on the SLE model. The SLE received some very nice alloy wheels, and they were shod with Dunlop SP Steelmax 205 HR 60/15 tyres, and they're not offered on any other models in the range. Those wheels were exclusive to the SLE. The SLE also featured the usual, velour interior, the power windows, air conditioning, and so on, plus the availability of an optional cruise control that I mentioned earlier. Other minor changes for the restyle included air extraction in the C-pillar, new thinner needles for the instruments, twin radio speakers on the top of the dashboard, new front and rear seat pads, and a contoured front seat backs for more knee room. The horn was also 3 to 4 times louder than it was previously. Other models that were available in the VC range were the CDT Commodores, which were available in different ranges from S1, S2 and S3, flared wheel arches, body kit, striping, and even a turbocharger was offered as part of that package. They're very, very rare, very thin on the ground. I don't think I've ever even seen one. They also made a CDT Gemini, which is a pretty cool little car, and again, they're very, very rare. You just don't see those these days, even at car shows. Getting back to the SLE for a moment, the two-tone silver looked really good. There was a light blue over silver, a darker blue over silver, metallic red over silver, metallic green over silver. You can also then get single-tone colours as well, monotone colours without the two-tone. The steering wheel was the single-spoke wheel, similar to a Citroen. I think that was what inspired Leo Pernod in terms of that design. I mentioned before the rear tail light treatment, which additional lenses inset. It was a very, very nice looking car. I remember years ago, a friend of mine worked for VH Holden at Pennant Hills, and I think I was pretty young at the time. I certainly was. I was probably 19 or something. But I went to the dealer, and they had a whole big lineup of SLE Commodores that they just got into stock. They must have done a bulk deal. there was about, I don't know, 10 or 12 of them all lined up. And I remember getting in one and they had the keys in them, and I just was driving it around the yard just so I could sort of say I've driven an SLE Commodore back in the day. I didn't drive it very far, of course, but that was a bit of fun. I would argue that I was just taking a bit of a test drive. Commodore also really pushed the V8 power, saying only Commodore gives you the option of a advanced Australian, V8 power pack, and that was something that they certainly pushed very strongly over Ford. They also pushed that with the police departments as well, because Ford was no longer able to offer those sorts of vehicles for highway patrol use, and that definitely just handed that market to Holden. As I mentioned before, if I could have any VH model in the range, I know the Brock cars are worth more money, but I'd have a navy blue over silver VH SLE Commodore. It was a very nicely equipped car. It had the trip computer, I'd have a 5-litre V8 with a dual exhaust, the automatic transmission, the stereo cassette system, center console, the nice velour interior, the optional cruise control, central locking, the headrests in the front and rear seats, the opera lights as well, the map pockets in the back of the front seats, power windows, and that rear treatment with the extra lights. It really was a nice package. You also had the contoured speakers, which were featured in all of the Commodores at the front, and then also a height adjustable driver's seat, which was another good feature as well. The Brock cars, this was really the infancy of the HDT vehicles. As I said, they had Group 1, Group 2, and Group 3. You could get, different stereo systems, different power outputs, different body kit features. The Group 3 had, I remember seeing one at, I think it was at Chatswood, dealer at Chatswood. I remember seeing the Group 3 Commodore with those little black fins on the front guards and the bonnet, bulge or scoop on the front, the side skirts, and the front air dam. I at the time, I must admit, I thought it was a bit over the top, especially with those little black stick-on, fins. I thought, they were a bit unnecessary, but certainly a very collectible car these days, without any doubt. A few of the rarer HDT cars have been uncovered in more recent years. There was a silver one, which was one of the very early cars that had been owned by Peter Brock. It was an 83 VH SLE 4-speed manual. That's a pretty cool car, pretty rare car that was recently found. Certainly if you can get your hands on an HDT car or even a standard SS, I can't even remember the last time I saw a VH SS Commodore, just a standard car. You just don't see them. The SLE Shadow Tones are very popular, but if you're able to get one of the HDT cars, again, they're very sought after and very desirable. From a motorsport point of view, the VH Commodore was first used in the Australian Touring Car Racing Series in 1982, in the 1982 Championship. There was a fair bit of controversy, though, because the Holden dealer team tried to use yet to be homologated parts, so they actually were disqualified from all but 2 races of the series. Later in the season, though, they were able to homologate the HDT VH Commodore SS, and Alan Grice drove his Commodore to pole position in the 82 James Hardy 1000 at Mount Panorama, Bathurst, and was the first driver to better than 100 miles per hour as an average lap time in qualifying. A VH Commodore SS went on to fill those models went on to fill the top 4 places in the race, and Peter Brock and Larry Perkins won the race. In 1983, the Commodore still featured strongly, driven by Alan Grice and Peter Brock, each winning 2 of the 8-round series. However, they were forced to give the championship to Alan Moffat, who was able to win more races in his smaller, lighter, and probably better suited to tighter tracks Mazda RX-7. A number of races were also won during that series with the Nissan Bluebird Turbo of George Fury. So at the end, Brock and Grice finished 3rd and 4th at the end of the championship. Further homologation grants, though, were allowed for the VH Commodore, and so it was the car to beat, with Peter Brock setting a pole position on the 83 James Hardy 1000, and Commodores filled 7 of the top 10 spots on the grid. Although Peter Brock's own car suffered an engine failure on lap 8 of the race, so he and Perkins then moved into the second car driven by John Harvey to go on and win the race. I'm sure John wasn't too happy about it. The second HDT car was in fact the 82 winning car, so it gave that particular car the distinction of winning the race twice. And VH Commodores would fill the first 6 of the 10 finishing spots during the race. Although for a variety of reasons, during the 84 Australian Touring Car Championship, that was actually won by Dick Johnson in his XE Falcon. A total of 141,000 VH Commodores were produced. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode on the VH Commodore. Certainly one of my favourite Commodores of all time, particularly the Shadow Tone SLE. But if you haven't already, check out the earlier episodes in the Commodore History Series, the VB and the VC, and keep an eye out for future episodes. We're going to cover the full Commodore range. You can also check out the Falcon History Series, the Chrysler Valiant History Series, and also the Fairlane History Series, plus a lot more content on the channel. So please give the episode a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't. Just double check if you are subscribed or you think you are, because it definitely helps the channel. So thanks very much, and we'll see you next time. Bye.